It's difficult enough getting a child to do it, so I think swabbing your dog might be difficult. It doesn't mean to say your dog won't have COVID. Remember, this disease came from bats, so this is not a completely ridiculous idea. But I think the point that you are trying to make, that this is in some way an authoritarian government who is trying to protect our public from the worst ravages of this disease, the case is not made, in my view.
Will you take an intervention?
Okay.
The point I was making was not so much about this being an authoritarian government. I don't think I used those words. The point is that the system has a big flaw in it, and that is that you can self-certify in terms of your lateral flow test result. That is the problem with the system. It basically means that anybody can put anything into the system, even if they haven't had a test of their own. And that, quite frankly, is a ridiculous system.
Okay. I acknowledge that that is a flaw in the system, but the alternative is to ban those who cannot have a vaccination from attending any of these events where a COVID pass will be required. So I don't think that's right, because there are people who simply cannot have a COVID pass for one health reason or another. So we have to just acknowledge that that is a small, tiny minority of the population, but nevertheless one we need to consider. So I understand completely that what you're saying, but it's always possible, if a hostelry is concerned about that, or an organisation is concerned, that is to lay on lateral flow testing outside the venue that they want to control people going into. So that is an option open to people. But I think, we heard earlier from the First Minister just how difficult the situation is in the health service, with ambulance crews not being able to turn up to work because they've got COVID, and that will also apply to other health professionals who are therefore making life much more difficult for their colleagues. And it seems to me we have to do everything possible to ensure that we have a suite of things. As Frank Atherton pointed out in his recent media interview, this is about a series of initiatives that help remind people that the pandemic is not over. So, of course, at the top of the list comes vaccination, and the government seems to be doing absolutely everything possible to ensure the maximum number of people are taking it up, certainly in Cardiff and the Vale Health Board. But also things like this, masks, which were not worn on the train that I went on to England last week, and there was no reminder on it as well. I know on other trains there are reminders and people are wearing them. But the social distancing is obviously the second thing. Every time we meet in close quarters, we are risking transmitting COVID. That's just a fact. So it is a balance between the liberty of being and the need to meet other people with suppressing the disease. And it seems to me that it is a pretty minor thing to ask people to present a COVID pass or to do a lateral flow test.
Jenny Rathbone, if I can just intervene, there's an intervention on Zoom. If you wish to take it,
I'm happy
please,
to take it.
It's Janet Finch-Saunders.
Thank you, Llywyd. Yes, Janet, I'll take it.
Thank you, Member Jenny, for taking the intervention. But given that the Chief Medical Officer for Wales has described these passes as having quite a small impact, as well as the Welsh Government's own NHS COVID pass impact assessment warning that it could provide an additional barrier to accessing those events for those on low incomes. And, our smaller establishments really are not prepared or geared up for this. We could be looking here at sustaining and creating greater well-being and equality. So do you honestly stand there with all courage and conviction, Jenny, that you can actually support this, and you wouldn't support holding back on this vote today, in fact voting against it, until we've had more evidence as to how the COVID passports have worked in some of our bigger venues? Because the First Minister was not convincing at all earlier regarding this.
Jenny Rathbone.
Thank you. Listen, the people on the lowest incomes are not able to go to the matches, either the rugby, the football or the cinema. You know, let's get real on this one. The fact is, it is a suite of measures that is what enables us to have the maximum impact on bringing down the infection rates. And that is what we're trying to do here. I do not think that the Welsh Government is going to continue with these regulations any longer than they are required. But in the meantime, businesses are missing a trick. I do not regard it as anti-business. I think this is pro-business because businesses are at liberty to adopt COVID passes, say in their hostelry or in their restaurant, and then parade it as a unique selling point for why people might want to go to their restaurant or their pub, you know, because they would be comfortable. Just as the First Minister described, people at the matches said, I felt better able to come here with confidence today because I knew that everybody would either have had their jabs or they would have been tested. So I think you are looking at it down the wrong end of the telescope on this one. And I think that this is something that does no harm and does plenty of good. And it is... Frank Atherton supports this as part of a suite of measures to enable people to realise that the pandemic has not gone away and people are still dying of it.
Senedd Williams.
Diolch, Llywydd.